John Marcus Hall was not an ordinary criminal. Born in a quiet suburb in Louisiana, Hall's early life showed signs of instability. An abusive father, a withdrawn mother, and a childhood marred by frequent run-ins with local law enforcement. By the age of 17, he had already spent time in juvenile detention for armed robbery. But it wasn't until 2009 that he committed the crime that shocked the entire state. On the night of July 16, 2009, Hall entered the home of 43-year-old Lisa Raymond, a well-known local schoolteacher. Surveillance cameras later showed Hall casing the neighborhood 2 nights before the crime. According to forensic reports, he broke in through a side window and waited inside. When Lisa returned from work, he ambushed her. What followed was a brutal assault that lasted for hours. She was tortured, murdered, and her body was mutilated in what prosecutors later described as a deliberate act of rage and control. Hall was arrested 4 days later, 80 miles away, after a high-speed chase. Inside his car were several of Lisa's personal belongings, a bloody knife, and his journal, containing graphic descriptions of the murder and drawings that mirrored the crime scene. His fingerprints were found on multiple surfaces in Lisa's house. DNA evidence confirmed his involvement beyond any doubt. The trial began in early 2010 and captivated the nation. Hall showed no remorse. His defense attempted an insanity plea, claiming he suffered from dissociative identity disorder, but multiple psychological evaluations declared him fit to stand trial. He was found guilty of first-degree murder, rape, and unlawful confinement. The jury took less than 2 hours to sentence him to death by lethal injection. In prison, Hall was both feared and studied. He exhibited signs of psychopathy, charming on the surface but manipulative and cold underneath. Guards described him as disturbingly calm and eerily polite. He read obsessively, especially books on escape artists and military strategy. Psychologists noted his high IQ and lack of empathy. Despite being on death row, Hall managed to build connections with other inmates, often exchanging legal advice or favors for information. His behavior raised eyebrows. While many death row inmates fell into depression or isolation, Hall remained alert, organized, and strangely optimistic. Prison officials later admitted he had requested detailed maps of the facility under the pretense of legal appeals. He spent countless hours in the law library and managed to subtly manipulate staff members into trusting him. In retrospect, several red flags were missed. He had made multiple cryptic statements during therapy sessions about going out on his own terms, and once told a guard, "The real sentence hasn't started yet." At the time, these comments were dismissed as death row anxiety. John Marcus Hall was not just a killer. He was a calculating individual who studied his environment, preyed on weaknesses, and waited patiently. He wasn't planning to die. He was planning to vanish. John Marcus Hall's escape didn't happen overnight. It was the result of months, possibly years, of meticulous planning, silent observation, and strategic manipulation. From the moment he stepped onto death row, Hall began studying the prison like a man preparing for a mission, not awaiting execution. At first, he played the role of the model inmate. He didn't start fights, followed orders, and even volunteered for work assignments in the law library and laundry unit. This behavior wasn't about rehabilitation, it was reconnaissance. Hall was collecting data, shift rotations, guard habits, surveillance blind spots, and most importantly, human behavior. One of the first flaws he noticed was the aging surveillance system in Block E. Due to budget cuts, half of the hallway cameras were either inactive or prone to flickering. A former maintenance worker turned inmate confided in Hall that the system hadn't been upgraded in over 6 years. Hall took mental notes. He memorized the timing of when cameras went dark and observed which guards relied on routine instead of active observation. Hall also noticed that certain guards had become desensitized to inmate activity. He slowly tested their limits, once staying 5 minutes too long in the hallway, another time walking past a checkpoint unnoticed. Each time, he learned more about the system's vulnerabilities. He didn't exploit them immediately. Instead, he filed the information away like pieces of a puzzle. Gathering tools was more delicate. Hall used his position in the laundry room to his advantage, secretly collecting items over time. industrial-strength sewing needles, wires, strips of cloth, and eventually a discarded maintenance key that had slipped through inventory checks. He also managed to bribe a kitchen worker for a small metal file, trading artwork and legal help in return. These tools weren't flashy, but were critical for unlocking grates, loosening bolts, and navigating air vents. But perhaps his greatest asset was his ability to manipulate people. Hall had a gift for reading others, and he used it to build subtle trust with guards and inmates alike. He learned which officers had personal problems at home, which ones were nearing retirement, and who might be vulnerable to small favors or compliments. He never asked for too much, only just enough to seem like a harmless, intelligent man trying to survive the end of his life. Among inmates, he carefully built a web of quiet loyalty. He helped one write letters to his children. He gave another legal advice that reduced his sentence. These weren't friendships, they were investments. When he needed distractions, information, or silence, these men provided it without question. One of Hall's more brilliant moves was gaining the trust of a guard named Officer Brantley, a man in his late 50s who had grown jaded after decades on the job. Hall made Brantley feel respected, even admired. He asked about his health, his kids, and listened. In return, Brantley let small things slide, things that would become cracks in the system Hall would one day walk through. Every move Hall made was with intent. He wasn't just biding time. He was engineering his freedom, one subtle step at a time. It was the early hours of September 14th, 2022, a rainy Tuesday morning at Black Ridge Correctional Facility. The prison was operating on a skeleton crew due to staff shortages and a flu outbreak that had sidelined several guards. It was a perfect storm of distraction and disarray, and John Marcus Hall knew it. At 2:47 a.m., Hall made his move. Using the metal file he had smuggled months earlier, he had already loosened several bolts on the back panel of the laundry room's industrial dryer unit. Over the course of several nights, he had crawled behind the machines during his shift and silently widened a vent opening that led into the old maintenance tunnels, abandoned, unlit, but still connected to the outer compound wall. Hall used strips of dark cloth to muffle the sound of the metal panel as he pried it open. Once inside the tunnel, he crawled for over 90 feet on his stomach, navigating broken pipes, rusted grates, and pools of stagnant water. At the tunnel's end was a rusted security door, locked but weakened from years of neglect. He pried it open using leverage and sheer will. Beyond it lay the yard's northwestern edge, where construction equipment had temporarily removed a section of fencing. By 3:18 a.m., Hall was out. He had stashed civilian clothes, smuggled in over weeks, in a trash bin near the work site. Within minutes, he had shed his prison uniform, changed clothes, and vanished into the dark forest bordering the facility. It took over 4 hours before anyone noticed his absence. When the morning head count came up short, alarms blared across the facility. A full-scale lockdown ensued. Drones were deployed, roads were blocked. The state police arrived by noon, and the FBI joined the manhunt the following day. Public panic surged. News outlets ran Hall's face non-stop. Rumors of sightings came from 3 different states within 72 hours. A reward of $250,000 was offered for any information leading to his capture. Inside the prison, an investigation revealed a catastrophic breakdown in protocol. Officer Brantley, the guard who had grown close to Hall, was placed on administrative leave after admitting he had skipped 2 rounds of security checks that night, partly due to trust in Hall's behavior. Though Brantley claimed no direct involvement, he later resigned under pressure. Despite an intensive 19-day manhunt involving helicopters, bloodhounds, and federal surveillance, Hall was never found. The trail went cold after authorities discovered an abandoned cabin 30 miles north with signs of recent occupation, food wrappers, burned clothing, and fingerprints matching Hall's. But he was gone. As of today, John Marcus Hall remains at large. Some believe he fled the country through an underground network. Others think he may have died trying to cross harsh terrain. But without a body or credible witness, his escape has become the stuff of legend. For law enforcement, his flight is a haunting reminder of how intelligence, patience, and human error can intersect to create the unthinkable. a death row inmate walking free.